Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting will be held in person and virtually using Zoom. As chair, I will be leading the meeting tonight, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join online via Zoom. If attendees experience audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This usually fixes the issue. Additional instructions on how to participate are posted online at burnsvillemn.gov in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and the city website. If you are unable to participate this evening and would like to submit public testimony, I do encourage you to email your comments to city staff or mail your comments directly to City Hall. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299. For each public hearing, I will open up a time when callers may speak to that item and give more instructions. Your call will be muted until that time. Please note there may be a slight delay due to differences in technology. If you are speaking by phone, please mute your computer since there may be a delay. Now on to tonight's agenda. The first item on tonight's agenda is adoption of the agenda. Do any members of the commission have any changes? Nope. Staff, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Nothing from staff.
Perfect. May I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, that motion passes. Moving on to approval of minutes. Consider tonight's approval for the March 6th. Today is not a March 6th.
It's not April 17th.
April 17th.
The minutes are from March 6th.
Minutes. Good evening, everybody. It is Monday. I'm going to totally blame it on Monday brain. Okay. The March 6th meeting minutes. Any changes to those minutes, commissioners? All right. How about staff? Any changes?
Nothing from staff.
Right. May I have an approval may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the motion passes. All right, citizen comments. Are there any members of the public or on Zoom who wish to speak?
I don't believe there's anybody waiting in the queue.
All right. With that being said, let's move on to tonight we have a public hearing on reviewing Burnsville's storm water pollution prevention program and a 2022 annual report, City Code Water Resource Management Plan, and SWPPP policy updates. And I welcome Jen to come join us. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So tonight we have our consultant from SEH, Emily Jennings. She's going to go through, and for some of the new commissioners, maybe they aren't familiar with this annual meeting that we have to go through our stormwater plan. She'll go through that, and then we have some compliance measures. We had some new permitting and that we needed to comply with. So we have additional approvals or recommendations tonight. So Emily will go through that, and I will be right over there in case anyone has any questions.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Emily Jennings, and I'm a Water Resources Engineer with SEH. I'm going to be here tonight to talk about the city's MS4 permit, as well as some other compliance measures like Jen mentioned. So the NPDES program, or National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, requires that the city has an MS4 permit, or a municipal separate storm sewer system. We're going to start talking about that today. And then we're going to transition to some updates that were made to the City Code, Water Resources Management Plan, and Stormwater Policy. We're going to circle back and talk about compliance, and then briefly look forward to kind of what's next for the permit. So like I mentioned, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, that's a federal program that was established with the Clean Water Act. And the administration of that program is handled on the state level. So in the state of Minnesota, that's the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And the city of Burnsville is a phase 2 small MS4. And what that means is they have general permit coverage, just like most of the neighbor communities kind of share the same requirements. So an MS4, or Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, is a stormwater conveyance or system of conveyances. It's kind of nice graphic that just shows how a lot of activities in the city go towards our receiving waters, and the things that we do contribute to our receiving waters. So the MS4 permit, as a permittee, the city is required to have a SWPPP, or Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And within that SWPPP, there are minimum control measures, or MCMs. There's a lot of acronyms associated with this program. So minimum control measure 1 of the city's SWPPP is public education and outreach. So each year, the city uses various methods to outreach to the public, including the newsletter, press releases, presentations, events, and training, city's website, and social media. Minimum control measure 2 is public participation and involvement. That's kind of the purpose of today's meeting, is to present the SWPPP, the stormwater program, and solicit the public's feedback. We could take comments today, but if not today, there also is a comment form available online throughout the year. Minimum control measure 3 is illicit discharge detection and elimination. So this portion of the stormwater program is that the city really inspects the outfalls and priority areas throughout the city to look for illicit discharges. There also is an illicit discharge hotline and online form, so anyone else can report a suspected illicit discharge. In the year 2022, there was 1 illicit discharge that was reported, and the Minnesota duty officer was contacted for that illicit discharge. Minimum control measure 4 is all about construction site runoff control. So this portion of the stormwater program is having erosion and sediment control requirements that need to be established during construction. The city inspects these construction sites, and if there are issues, a correction notice or notice of violation is issued. In the year 2022, there were 24 active sites. The city completed 187 inspections. And there were 44 written notices of violation via email that were issued. Kind of sounds like a lot, but nothing escalated further than that, so it was effective. Minimum control measure 5 is post-construction runoff control. So the point kind of this portion of the stormwater program is that the city has requirements in place, and kind of a high-level look at those is that the city requires that pre-development runoff rates are matched. The city is consistent with the minimal impact design standards, and the city completes reviews of any potential developments. In the year 2022, there were 13 permits that were issued for sites greater than 1 acre in the city of Burnsville. And lastly, minimum control measure 6. This minimum control measure is called pollution prevention or good housekeeping. It's a sort of a little bit of like a practice what you preach thing. You know, the city has requirements for developers, but they're also expected to kind of maintain their own infrastructure here. So within the city, there are several sumps, outfalls, and ponds. And as you can see, 93% of the sumps were inspected in 2022, 17% of the outfalls, and 21% of the ponds. So the goal here is that the sumps would be inspected annually, and the outfalls and ponds are about 20% annually, kind of get them in 1 permit cycle. So now kind of switching gears. So we're going to talk about the updates that were made to the city code, water resources management plan, and stormwater policy. So in February of 2020, the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District adopted new rules. And shortly after that, the MS4 permit was reissued in November of 2020. So these kind of 2 things combined led us to updates that were needed to the city code, water resources management plan, and the policy to maintain compliance with these rules. So starting off with the city code. So city code title 6, there was a new section created in chapter 2, and it was all about animal waste. So the requirements of this are owners or custodians of pets are required to pick up after their pets, keep areas where pets congregate clean as possible, because the pet waste does contribute to water quality or affects the water quality. City Code Title 7, Chapter 2, Section 21, prohibited discharge into the sanitary sewers and storm drainage system. This is kind of the illicit discharge section of the city code. So there were some minor changes just to provide a little bit more clarity to that section. And then in Chapter 7, a new section was created all about de-icers. So essentially, for salt or sand use in the winter, anything that would be classified as a de-icer, some rules for how that is stored long term and how it's cleaned up, because de-icing does it does have an effect on our water quality as well. And then City Code Title 10, there were 2 sections that were modified, including in Chapter 8, Section 8, which is controlling erosion and sediment from land disturbing activities, and Section 11, stormwater management overlay district standards. Section 8, there were quite a few larger changes that were made, and we'll get into that a little bit more in the next section, but essentially the majority of that section was removed and kind of moved towards the Water Resources Management Plan, Appendix C. So that section was shortened up and really references that Water Resources Management Plan document. There were very few changes to Section 11 because that section already really referenced that Appendix C of the Water Resources Management Plan, so just a couple minor revisions there. So the code was updated as well as the Water Resources Management Plan. So Appendix B of the Water Resources Management Plan is a volume control infiltration worksheet. This worksheet is meant for anyone who's proposing development or designing development in the city of Burnsville that meets the requirements. This worksheet sort of goes hand in hand with the requirements of Appendix C. So that was updated to follow the new Appendix C. Appendix C, also called the development standards. Again, this is a document for those who want to develop a site or design a site in the city of Burnsville. There were several changes that were made to this document. And the biggest one probably falls within the stormwater management section. So like I mentioned, the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District updated their rules as well as the new MS4 permit. So those new rules were built into the stormwater management section. So that includes volume control for development, water quality, and rate control requirements. There also is an erosion and sediment control section. So again, we saw those new requirements and also a lot of that content that used to be in the city code now into this document. And then there's a handful of other sections. There is a flood control section and a section for special waters and wetlands. Those were revised slightly to be consistent with the code as it stands. And there is a section for design criteria and submittals. And those were changed to be really clear and consistent and just make it really obvious on what the design criteria is and what needs to be submitted to the city to get the permit. So in addition to all of those changes, we created some flowcharts. So this can get kind of complicated. So flowcharts to help with sort of an at-a-glance look, help people figure out kind of where they're going to land in these new requirements. And there is one figure and one table that is also associated with Appendix C. So here's just one of the 3 flowcharts that we made. So you're not meant to be able to, I know the text is small, you don't need to kind of read it and review the entire thing, but as you can sort of see here, it just helps those designers and developers figure out where they're going with their requirements. So this is kind of an at-a-glance of the development standards document. So the stormwater management policy. So the policy document it sort of exists alongside the city's MS4 program. It's a large portion of the city's SWPPP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And how I mentioned kind of early on, those different minimum control measures and what the city does for compliance. This is a procedural document that goes side by side with that. So it's got sections minimum control measures 1 through 6. It also has a section for discharges to impaired waters. So the overall goals of the update of all documents was compliance. The city needs to maintain compliance with the watershed requirements as well as their MS4 permit. But also we took this opportunity to be really consistent, have consistency in references and where people go for what information, and to keep the development standards as the source for design and submittal requirements for those who are designing project or developing projects in the city of Burnsville. So, switching gears now to compliance. So the purpose of today's meeting is, that minimum control measure 2, public participation and involvement. A similar meeting was held last year. There were no comments and therefore no changes were made to the city SWIP because of that. Alongside this annual meeting in this process, the city does an annual review and a self-assessment. The 2022 annual report preparation has been a little bit different this year. Normally, we would be talking about a report that was submitted to the MPCA or will be submitted to the MPCA regarding the 2022 activities for the MS4 program. However, the MPCA is doing something a little bit different this year. They are switching their reporting to something that it's e-services. It's essentially the MPCA's website for taking permit applications and annual reports. As they make that switch, there is no report that will be submitted to the MPCA this year. However, they do want that information submitted when e-services is ready to go, so that'll be sometime summer of 2024. So the city still completed the annual review and self-assessment and maintained compliance with those activities, just kind of waiting for that new change to reporting to happen next year. And that's again why we're here today, to talk about the city's stormwater program. If there were any comments, the city would review and respond to those. So looking forward, the code updates, development standards in stormwater policy, the next step is city council meeting on May 2nd. Jen, did you want to add anything else about the process?
I think on a future slide we have what our recommendations are, so I can wait till then.
All right, thank you. So we're also looking forward, like I said, using the e-services in 2024 to submit the annual report, and that will be a 2022-2023 combined annual report. So now staff recommendations.
So the council has to approve all of these documents, but we're bringing it before this commission tonight for recommendations for approval. So we have the Title 10 code updates to our water resources management plan, Appendix B and C, and then changes to the stormwater management policy 5.155. There's a summary in your materials that had a little bit more detail about what we did in each of those areas. And so in addition to holding a public hearing tonight to take those public comments on our overall program, we'd be looking for the commission to make a recommendation to recommend approval by the city council for these three things.
I do have a question. Curious about, you mentioned de-icing and things like that. What kind of best management practices is the city doing? Are they doing smart salting, those kinds of things? Just looking for a little information on the detail.
Yeah, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah,
You did the
so the city is required, as an MS4 community and one that owns and operates some type of salt storage, the city is required to have salt kept on an impervious surface as well as undercover. And then they are required to implement best management practices when you are transferring or, loading or unloading the material. So the city has those structural BMPs in place, that impervious bottom, and then the cover, and then implementing those best practices. There's covered during winter maintenance trainings and those kind of things. Staff understand that, hey, if we see, deposits of salt, we need to pick them up, move them into that salt storage. And then as well as for the actual winter maintenance, the city participates in the smart salting training, and they attend the MPCA's trainings that are out there, as well as perform calibration of equipment to, only really use what needs to be used. It's really mutually beneficial for the city and the receiving waters, so.
Great, thanks.
All right. I thank you. Is there anything else before we?
I had a dumb question. I know what outflows are and I know what ponds are, but where do we have sumps?
Sure. So sumps are in line with our storm sewer system. They're essentially, they can be a variety of different things, but the simplest form is just a manhole structure that is deep. And it has a pipe that's not at the bottom, but it's elevated a little bit. So in between your two pipes, you have kind of this, dead storage of water. So as water falls in, it splashes into that water, and the big grit and large sediments settle out in that kind of little pool of water before it kind of bounces out to the next storm sewer system. So those are, they can often be found prior to an outfall, prior to a discharge point, or sometimes they're, like if someone goes in and does a development, they're sort of at that most downstream end. To kind of, do your best to treat your water before it now moves on to something else, whether it be someone else's property or right of way or receiving water.
I have a question regarding the salt. We've addressed the city. What about larger retail operations?
Yeah, so that's section 12 of chapter 7. That is targeted at institutions, educational institutions, industrial facilities, and commercial facilities. So that city code section is really targeted towards them. And the requirement is that they have to store their salt properly and use it properly. We shouldn't see, for example, a large pile of salt just kind of sitting in a parking lot waiting to be used. That wouldn't be an appropriate use. It needs to be stored under cover or in a sealed container, used sparingly, and then again, if there's large deposits, it should be cleaned up after the fact. So that section was directed towards those type of facilities.
Okay, what about post-winter, if we ever get there? The responsibility of property management to clean their parking lots, and then what do they do with what they've scooped up after usage?
Yeah, so that's, I wish I had the exact section in front of me. The requirements are that it has to be disposed of properly. It should be, what that could look like a few different things. It could be saved and reused, or it should be thrown away. It shouldn't be tossed out in the yard or, something like that. Disposed of properly. It's kind of the expectation. That could look differently, of course, depending on how much or what it is.
JJ, is there anyone in the public that is interested in commenting before we continue with commissioners?
I am not getting any indication that there is.
All right, so we can go ahead and close the public hearing.
Did we formally?
I think you need to open the
I
public
think you
hearing.
need to formally open and then formally
Thank
close.
you. Do I need a motion for Carlos to take over for me tonight? With all this stuff?
You're doing great.
All right, I would like to open this item up for a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to be part of the public hearing?
I am getting nobody on Zoom is what I'm being told.
Sounds great. Now may I close the public hearing? Sounds good. I would like to close the public hearing. And then commissioners, we can continue our comments, questions that we might have. My one question that I do have is, when the city cleans up the roads once everything is done, where do they dispose of what they've cleaned up from the roads in terms of salt and debris?
And I think I'll throw that one your way.
So we do annual street sweeping, and we're doing that right now. And so then they dispose of it in a landfill.
All right. So is it kind of like a vacuum where they just kind of like sweep it up and then vacuum it into?
Yes, yep. It's swept up and then yeah, exactly right. And then we get all of that sediment. It's sediment, it's salt, it's all the debris that you've seen that's collected all winter. We do it again in the fall. So pick up leaves, although no one should be raking their leaves into the street for this purpose, just a side note on that. But we do it for both spring and fall cleanup, and then it's disposed of. I'm not sure, I'd have to check with our maintenance superintendent how much they can compost, but they dispose of it properly, landfill, or I think they can potentially do some composting.
Perfect. And then my other question was looking at the section about animals and animal waste. How is pet animal waste different than wild animal waste when it comes to the water?
It's not, honestly. I think the reason why domestic pets we saw some new change in regulation related to that is because it's tangible. It's easy for, I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's an attainable requirement to say that owners of domestic pets should clean up after their pets if they're at the park or on a walk. It's really difficult for the regulation to require wild animals are cleaned up for. So I think that although it's not very different, this again is something that can be done. There are, as regarding bacteria, animal waste contributes to bacteria pollutants in water. There are requirements that the city puts in place to get other sources of bacteria, and while wild animals is part of that, again, it's not going to be a requirement that we have to clean up after the deer or anything.
But we do clean up after the geese. After a while.
The geese are, yes, they're guilty of contributing to this problem.
They're a little more concentrated when they're all roosting
Right.
on the beaches.
Yes.
And golf courses.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if there are no other questions, I believe that staff is looking for us to make a recommendation that council approve the updates to City Code Title 10. The council approve updates to Appendix B and C of the Water Resources Management Plan, and the council approve the updates to the Stormwater Management Policy 5.155.
So recommend.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I think that passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We will now move on to our multimodal plan update with Ms. Jen Desrud once again.
All right. So tonight I'm just going to go over our 2021 multimodal plan, just a recap of why we have it, some of the goals we have, and then some upcoming projects and things that we're studying. So the plan was approved by the City Council in October of 2021, and the purpose was to develop a safer and more inclusive transportation system for all users. And this is really important to me, especially the most vulnerable users of the system. So those are the people who aren't driving cars. That's everyone else who's not driving a car. And it aligns with our City Council strategic vision, values, priorities, our 2040 comp plan, and our 2020 sustainability plan. So this is a document that fits under all of those umbrellas. And the main goals of the multimodal plan were, for me as the city engineer, trying to make sure that we were investing in areas that needed it. So we called it a blueprint for investment. As we're preparing our capital improvement program, where should we prioritize? And then action-oriented implementation strategies. So looking at data, looking at where things are needed, looking at it from a holistic approach. And then at the time, we were looking at opportunities for new and shared mobility investments. That's one chapter. I'm not going to really go through that today. During that process, we did a really broad public engagement. We had 10 in-person events, and we had an online survey and a paper map at those events, so people could draw on a map. These are areas that are important to me. These are crossings that I get nervous crossing and things like that. We had an interactive website where when you were online, we were trying to promote going to this website, and there was places where you could put a pin in those same locations. We delivered flyers, 500 flyers in 3 languages. We had social media posts, we had Burnsville bulletin articles, and then we had 6 meetings and workshops, and one of those was with this group. And here's just, not to read it all, but this is kind of a summary of what that community engagement had. We got a lot of data to use towards the plan. And here, this box that I've just highlighted, the top 5 priorities really are safety, crossing comfort, maintenance, access, and connectivity. Those are the main drivers of how we created the plan. At the same time, we worked through a complete streets policy, which was approved at the same time by the council. And that is where we go through all of our capital improvement projects and we look at them from a complete streets lens. So we can't always build a trail, but maybe there's some crossing improvements we can do with our projects, or maybe there's some restriping we can do to add a bike lane if that makes sense. And then we complete this worksheet to just show that we've evaluated it. We haven't made, in the past with projects, we never did this before, so we just started it in the last 2 years. And our traffic committee reviews that. That's an internal committee with maintenance, fire, police, planning, communications, to make sure that we're not missing anything or anything, from a snow plowing perspective. Do we really want all these bump outs, Jen? No, but I say yes. So there's a little fighting about it, but we try to come to concurrence about what kind of improvements we can make. And then active transportation infrastructure, this section is really how do we implement? What's our action plan? And these are some strategies to use. So we do it in conjunction with a planned project. So we already have, so many millions of dollars of street improvements. With the complete streets policy, can we add a little bit more money while we're doing the project and make some multimodal improvements? We also do it with redevelopment, and then there's some opportunities that just present themselves. Grants or other agency partners like Dakota County come to the table with some money and it makes sense. And then there's some standalone projects. That would be something where it's a huge priority and we plan for it and we put it as a standalone project into our capital improvement program. So I'm going to go through some of the projects we have coming up. Our 2023 implementation plan. So this is ones that are in conjunction with planned projects. So in 2023, we are doing a street improvement project on Nicollet Avenue between McAndrews and 42. And we're just sort of setting the stage. We have existing trails kind of in all around it, but not on it. On Nicollet is narrow sidewalks. And in 2022, we installed, or we striped on-street bike lanes through the hospital area. That used to be 2 lanes in each direction. It's divided now. It's 1 lane in each direction with a wide bike lane. And we also put bike lanes on Portland. So with our 2023 projects, we're going to be putting a 10-foot asphalt or bituminous trail on the east side, which will connect well with the trails that are north of McAndrews. Also connects with the existing trail that's on County Road 42, and it will connect with our on-street bike lanes that are through the hospital area. So making those connections, and it just works out that it's on a street project that we already had planned. And then south of 42, we are doing a street project on Grand Avenue. That's the same trail that was kind of on this bottom of the picture before, a 10-foot trail on the north side. That's that extension of the bike lane on Portland. And we're proposing a connection 10-foot trail on the west side, so on the MnDOT side. So there's no driveway accesses, that bike can kind of go without any interruptions between South Cross and 42. This is an example of a redevelopment type of implementation. So this is in the heart of the city. The real life co-op is kind of right in the center of the map there. We have under construction 135 units at the villas. 162 units at the Concord Flats. Those are under construction now. I'm sure you've seen them. And the blue lines are all of our sidewalk networks, existing sidewalks. So there's a lot of sidewalks out there, but there's a glaring gap. I'll show you in a minute. So, oh, and also I should add, the Gateway Housing Second Edition, if you can see my pointer, proposes to add another 111 units right here. So if you are at the new apartments and you want to go to Nicollet Commons Park, this is the way to get there on our current sidewalk network, which is a little long and out of the way. And this is how you're more likely going to do it, cutting through that green space. It's quicker, it's shorter, it's direct. So what we're proposing, and it's going to be at council for consideration tomorrow night, is to construct a trail in that area that's in sort of lime green between Pleasant and Pillsbury. And we've been actively working with the Real Life Co-op, and we'll continue to work with them on obtaining an easement to do that. Funding for that is a redevelopment funding, because those apartments had to pay us a park dedication fee, and we're using those funds directly for this. So it's kind of redevelopment related. Those users of those, or the residents of those apartments will likely use it, and it was a really kind of a good nexus. In the Burnsville Center Village area, the areas in green are existing. And these are our two that we're constructing with our 2023 projects that I had brought up earlier. We have, and I'll talk about this in a later presentation, but we have our 35W County Road 42 Buck Hill Road, which we are building with the TED grant. We're building some trails with that project. And then the areas here, we applied for a Safe Streets for All grant. We were not successful, but we heard that we had a great application. We should try again. But that would construct all of these trails. So having two 10-foot trails on both sides of County Road 42 and on both sides of County Road 5, on one side of South Cross and on one side of 150th Street, and then on the west side of Buck Hill Road, creating this network so you can get anywhere you need to go in this area, kind of around the mall area. We have in our CIP, and we'll be working on soon, is preliminary engineering for the light blue dashed, so just the county road. We have a partnership with Dakota County, and if we can get plans to a 30%, we say, and get construction costs, then we are just better positioned for applying for those grants. We know better how much it's going to cost. Right now, we kind of throw, the county uses $3 million per mile of trail. The city's been using $1.5 million per mile. It costs more to build a street, or costs more to build a trail than it does a street, because of the need for right-of-way, the need for retaining walls, the grading and all of that. So right now we have most of the street right-of-way we need. So and we're repaving streets that are already existing. Similarly, in Cliff area, we have partnered with Dakota County to look at trail gaps along Cliff Road, and that's kicking off tomorrow. We're actually kicking off that contract with a consultant tomorrow. They're going to look at trail gaps and crossings along Cliff Road in the area in red. And they're also going to look at future roadway under 35W bridge to see fitting a trail under the bridge there. And then we're going to look at a multimodal connection between Cliff and 13, because I'll talk about this in a minute. 13 and Nicollet is a big project, a big multimodal crossing, and so we want to position ourselves so that when that gets constructed, we can get to Cliff, we can get to the river, we can cross the river and all in a connected way. This is what I said it would be in a minute. It's the Highway 13 and Nicollet. So this is almost a $45 million project. It will grade separate Nicollet. So 13 would go under Nicollet. Keeping pedestrians at the street level is a safer approach than just building a ped bridge. So some people have asked, wouldn't a ped bridge be way less expensive? And yes, it would be way less expensive. But if you have to go on like a circle to get up to the top of the ped bridge and cross, and then a circle to go down, or you see, I want to go straight across. Some people will not do that longer way. So if we keep Nicollet up and have the sidewalks right on Nicollet, then that's gonna be the straight across route. And 13 is a giant barrier for crossing, and so having Nicollet be elevated above and 13 depressed will be a major improvement. We've already secured a little over 15 million. So we have a $10 million grant from the Met Council. We have 3 million in federal funds. We have city CIP money, and we have Dakota County partnering. I was at the legislature today asking for bonding money. The council has asked that the state bond for this project, and so we're hoping to be successful with that. And we continue to apply for a bunch of grants, federal grants, because that 45 million is steep, but we're chipping away. We do the 3 million in federal money that we've already gotten will be used for preliminary design. And so once we have preliminary design, it's a little bit more momentum to get the rest of the project going. And we're scheduled for 2027 construction. So this is not my project. Public Works Director Ryan Peterson asked that I talk about this as part of the multimodal. So the Lake Marion Greenway is a collaboration with Dakota County, and it is planned as a connection, a regional connection between multiple points of interest, so parks and green spaces, to get all the way up to the Minnesota River. We have the Kelleher segment constructed and the Rose Bluff segment constructed, but the gap is in the middle. Dakota County and the city applied for federal funding, but we did not receive it. So right now where we're at is we're continuing to work with Dakota County, and we're gonna continue to work with the neighbors because there's multiple options for how to get through here. And right now, none of them have been truly selected. It's kind of keep working with the neighborhood, try and find a solution that works to get that gap filled between. And then lastly, this is an unfortunate part of our implementation plan. We were not successful in obtaining a grant. So there is no sidewalk on Greenwood Drive between County Road 5 and around that curve. Leah's Apartments is an apartment for disabled adults, and so a lot of times people who live there who want to come out to County Road 5 for transit or access to any of the retail locations walk in the street or cut through a parking lot, and it's just not a real safe way. So we were approached by one of the residents who is no longer living there, but to try and build this sidewalk, and this active transportation grant seemed like a perfect solution. We did apply at the end of last year, and we were notified, I think about a month ago, that we were not selected for the project, but we'll keep trying on this one too, because it's a really important gap to fill. So that is my presentation on multimodal. I'm happy to take any questions. I think this was a lot more interesting than stormwater stuff.
But it's pretty comprehensive too. So I keep hearing that there's some kind of community objection to expanding that Marion Gap.
Oh,
I know that's Ryan's project.
yes. I think the issue here is that there's already existing trail segment along Sunset Pond, and the concern is that the faster cyclists will take over that trail and make it uncomfortable for people who are just walking or strolling, or slower bikers who are just more leisurely. So there is an option to have an on-street route. That's the one in pink with some off-street connections. I think people, if we have two options, they're gonna take the one that suits them the best. And so if they're faster cyclists, they prefer on street. And so that would, if we have the correct signage, you know, if you wanna go more than 10 miles an hour on your bike, you shouldn't be on one of these trails anyway. So, and a lot of times cyclists can go 20, 30, they're on, so I think that's the concern. So Ryan is gonna continue to have those conversations. We're gonna have more public engagement opportunities to meet and discuss.
Well, as somebody who walks that trail almost every day, I don't see a lot of high-speed bicyclists. It's just the, you know, the neighborhood bicyclists that I see on the whole trail, so.
Yeah, I think the concern is that they will come, true or not, but if they did have another option where they were not trying to dodge around baby strollers and things like that, they would probably take the on-street route, I would imagine, but more to come on this one.
Okay.
It does look like along Sunset Pond, there's more corners, more potential surprises. It's also more goose evidence. So I would think that would be a selling point for judicial for somebody who doesn't want stuff tossed up off their tires. So,
Yeah, potentially. I think the plan shows widening trail. I think the note is soften the curves. So some construction would be done. It wouldn't be just used in as it is today.
okay, not the same footprint. There'd be some smoothing of corners and things.
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
A goose crossing.
Those geese are violating the city code.
And more than
We
one
yell
level.
at them every day.
What's the likelihood for bonding, do you think, for right now? Do you have a crystal ball on that?
I was at the Transportation Committee hearing. Luckily, we were first. There were 45 other items to be heard. So I'm not sure. I'm cautiously optimistic. And I think having introduced it into the bonding legislation this year gives us a better chance at future years because it'll be a repeat project. We've also continually applied for grants. And so if we don't get the bonding this year, it's a 2027 construction. So if we don't get it this year, we can certainly try again next year. And hopefully we've gotten some more federal grants acquired that makes our bond request a lot more appealing.
With the 15 million you currently have on board, do any of those funds expire, and can any of it be used for the planning stages?
Yes, so all funds expire, but we have a really big window of 5 years.
Oh.
So we're good on that. The 3 million from the federal, it was a federal congressionally directed spending, was for preliminary engineering. So we are gonna use that 3 million. There's a local match that we're starting to look at. How do we get that together? We're asking MnDOT and Dakota County to assist with the local match that's required. But we're looking at doing that later this fall or into next year, starting the preliminary engineering. For $3 million, we'd expect to be able to get a whole plan set and like be ready to go, have really good cost estimates. And then we can certainly keep applying for grants based on that. And we also will have, one of the determinants for grants is project readiness. So the more we can push along, the more ready we are, the better the grant will look.
Thank you.
I'm looking at Nicollet and Highway 13. How does that work with the buses getting into the Minnesota Valley Transit Authority?
They will still have the same access through that same traffic signal that they have today up here. And they have access here.
But from 13 onto Nicollet,
From 13 on to Nicollet. So they would come to this traffic light and come up to the roundabout. And then the roundabout would bring them to, and same with Orange Line, they'd have access there.
okay.
So there's still gonna be a signal on 13, but it'll have a reduced number of vehicles going through it. So it will be an improvement for the mainline 13 traffic operations, but also by separating them out, grade separating them out with Nicollet, be improvement for Nicollet. So there is still a signal. It's not a freeway through 13. There's still a signalized condition there.
But there won't be a pedestrian crossing there at all? So
No pedestrian crossing at this location, but you can kind of see this like little thicker line. It's on both sides. There's a little wider trail. You would stay, if you're coming from heart of the city, you would just go around the roundabout and cross up on the bridge. if you want to keep going to Holiday, you just cross, there's a smaller crossing that's an on-ramp, it's fewer vehicles. Or if you wanted to get over here, you could cross at grade, or for anyone who wanted to go around, you go underneath and come back up. So there's a way to stay traffic conflict free if you wanted to.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're combining the pedestrian crossing with that upgrade up and over Nicollet.
Right.
And the traffic light on 13 would be east of Nicollet then?
Yes, yeah, it's offset so that you can still come from here, and then you're down low on 13 and come back up to Nicollet. So it's kind of almost like a ramp up.
All
to
right,
that
so if you're
roundabout.
going from Nicollet, heading north on Nicollet to 13, then you'll work that roundabout to that light to get on 13 then, correct?
Yes, yep, unless you wanted to go on to 35W north, you can use this access. So avoiding 13 altogether.
It's gonna be a mess during construction.
It'll be great when it's done.
That's what I was just thinking. Too bad we have to wait for so long.
Yes, all transportation planning takes a long, long time.
There's so much that goes into it. It's kind of amazing. Any other questions from commissioners on this project?
Just a quick question, on that grant that wasn't approved by Leah's apartment, what was the main reason why?
So there were, it was funding, they didn't have enough money to give to, there was a lot of projects that applied, and then they just ranked them, and we just ranked just outside of the window. They didn't give me a ranking, but they did provide me with a list of all the projects, and it looked like they were in order, and we were in the top 5, and I think they funded the top 3.
Bummer. Yeah, I was just curious if there was a specific reason, cause I drive through here all the time to take my dog to agility class, and all winter I'd see cars lined up on this road that I don't know if they're because of the snow removal in the apartments or whatnot, and just thinking how there really isn't a lot of space in there as is right now.
Yeah. One of the things that the grant reviewers had said was they may have additional money from the legislature, and they may just take the list of projects and just start funding. So I have a little glimmer of hope that they might fund enough to get to ours, because this is a really important connection.
Any other questions? All right, so there's no formal action on this line item tonight. Shall we move on to Heart of the City update? Where I'm gonna welcome Jen Desrud to present on Heart of the City. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. I am going to welcome Regina Dean, who is our Assistant Community Development Director. We worked on this collaboratively, engineering and community development, so it was a planning document, so Regina's going to cover the bulk of it, and I will cover the implementation.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. Thank you, Chair. So Heart of the City Design Framework, it was initially established in 1999. It's hard to believe it was almost 25 years before we took a relook at it, and how much happened between then and now. And so a lot has happened since then. We've seen a lot of new condos, apartment buildings. The Orange Line is within the area, and so we wanted to look at not only the framework or that guiding document, but some of the work that has been done, such as sidewalks, street lighting, the park space that we have within the area, and if any improvements or some guidance needed to be made in respect to maybe relooking at what's already been installed. Some of the pavers are upheaving and are a tripping hazard and cause some mobility impediments for people in wheelchairs, or for example. And so that was a goal one, to update what was existing, that almost 25-year-old plan, evaluate those existing conditions, and then think of this as a kind of with fresh new eyes. So looking at, is there opportunity for wayfinding, signs to guide us to things like parking, or if you're walking from a different area, where is Nicollet Commons Park? I can't believe people wouldn't know where it is, but maybe they don't. And then public art. There is certainly a lot of public art within heart of the city, but is there opportunity for more public art, or maybe directing people to the public art with that wayfinding? We also want to look at parking. We do have a parking ramp and parking structure and on-street parking, but is that enough parking? Do we need more? Or do we need, again, wayfinding to try to get people to find these well-designed, beautiful ramps, but some people don't even know they're parking. And so we wanted to look at that, as well as our special assessment policy. That was something that was being looked at by our city council and our public works engineering staff, to see how those nice improvements that we have within heart of the city is it equitable, and how people are charged for those higher added amenities within that space. So that gave us an opportunity to relook at what we had in place. And of course, public engagement. We wanted to really convene the community and get feedback not only from the commissions, our council, but then also the general public that use the space. There were a number of opportunities which we connected with our city council. I should back up. We ended up selecting Damon Farber as the lead consultant that worked with us through the process and developed our final framework. But they had subcontractors with, I believe, was it SEH? SEH and HKGI, a couple of different have a landscape lens, a planning lens, and then also an engineering lens for the work that they did. Again, we connected with our city council. We had a joint commission meeting, some familiar faces in those photos. Our Parks, Recreation, Natural Resources Commission, Economic Development Commission, and Planning Commission attended a joint workshop to provide feedback. I think we had an interactive text where we ranked projects, and that was nice to have something interactive. There were also opportunities. Let's see here. Looks like, yeah, lots of council work sessions there. We had opportunity to engage with the public, as I had mentioned before, 2 pop-up events at the Fire Muster and Nicollet Commons Park. We also had the opportunity to go to the association that Jen just spoke about, where that trail's proposed between the school district property and the co-op. So as you can see, that middle photo, that was our engagement with the co-op folks, and I think they had mentioned connecting within the area, and we heard them loud and clear about with engaging on this heart of the city framework as well. We had the opportunity to go to the middle school just right up the road. That was probably my favorite, to hear what the students in that age range thought of heart of the city. In fact, when I mentioned heart of the city, they looked at me like, what? Heart of the city? And then I started naming some of the businesses in the area, and I mentioned Caribou. And then they're like, oh yeah, we know what you're talking about. So apparently middle schoolers love Caribou. So that was a great opportunity. I think one of them mentioned they wanted to see a nightclub within the area. That was an interesting use, and but they love art. Public art was something that they really got excited about as well. But great to have their feedback. We did an online survey and a mapping exercise as well with this project, and we also had a staff project management team that was included. We met often. I can't remember if it was monthly. Thanks, Jen. We met monthly, and it comprised of people from various departments, planning, engineering, parks, our community engagement, communications, but then also our staff members from our public works department that are out in the field taking care of our sidewalks and our landscaping within that area that are, you know, on the ground day to day, that we're able to provide feedback as well. And you know, a lot of times, like as a planner, we dream big, and it's like, well, you know, do we have equipment to clean it? Can it be cleared? What's the long-term maintenance? What's the cost associated with that? So having a bigger group giving feedback was great. So we took all of that information, what we learned from the past, the current, that 1999 document, the feedback from the community, feedback from our commissions and council. We also looked at other work that we had done. I didn't really touch on this, but we had done a rezoning of the area from our heart of the city to more of a transit-oriented development zoning district, and expanded heart of the city, not only from south of Highway 13, north of Burnsville Parkway, kind of Nicollet, and then to the west of I-35W. We continued it on further west of I-35W to stretch what we now consider kind of a larger heart of the city area. So we wanted to look at what are the connections, those mobility connections from west of 35W over on the other side, further east, basically to Nicollet. So a relook, after we were done, we came up with a list of table of contents, which you see on this slide here, and I'm going to turn it over to Jen to get more into the details of that, and yeah, we'll go from there. Thank you. And at the end, I'm more than answer questions too.
I'll just sit over here. So as you can see, it's a really comprehensive table of contents going through, you know, what was done for the study itself. How did we come to this document? How did we have arrived at mission and guiding principles? And then what did we want the heart of the city to look like? What's the character of each? The heart of the city, you've got sort of your around Nicollet Commons, but it goes wider than that. And then a lot of it is in the public space. So the prior framework was focused on both the public and the private, but as Regina mentioned, we have our city code now speaks to the private development. So this is really now more of a public document about the public spaces, the streets, the sidewalks, the trails, the landscaping, all the things that are within the public right of way. And for me, as an engineer, I like to build stuff, and so I love an implementation table. And so some of the near-term things that are coming up is a paver replacement plan. The pavers in the area, if you've been in the area, they're heaving, they're a tripping hazard, they're not ADA compliant or accessible. And so we also have a color concrete problem out there. So we are going to slowly chip away. We can't do it all at once. It would be just vastly too expensive, but finding the worst areas and replacing pavers. We're proposing no longer having pavers, but having more of a decorative concrete that's not various shades of pink. So trying to like make it so that it is something that is maintainable, but still looks nice and is elevated for something that is a sort of a special place, heart of the city. We have started working on that paver replacement plan. And starting to budget for it, but we haven't, obviously, if you've been out there, we have not replaced any pavers, but it's in the near term. And then heart of the city district parking and management plan, we're just kicking that off in the next couple of weeks. The city council is going to consider ordering that project at their meeting tomorrow night. And what that is that we did hear that sometimes there's nowhere to park. And I think the issue is there are plenty of places to park, but people don't know how to get to those places. So the consultant team we're looking for them to give us recommendations. We don't believe the recommendation will be to build more parking, but it might be. But really, how are we most efficient with our parking? How do we direct people to open spaces? There's technology out there to help us, and so that's what we're hoping to gain from that district plan. And then in the heart of the city wayfinding plan, that's something we have sort of marked in our 2024 CIP, is coming up with a comprehensive way to have a district plan. Right now there's signage out there, there's blue signs with hearts, there's other things all over. It's not cohesive, it's not coordinated. And so something that we'll work with our community engagement and communications department on, but also hiring a consultant to help us come up with where do signs go, how do they direct, do we use technology, do we not, and so that will be coming up in a couple of years. And then the last on the implementation is part of a MnDOT project. So in 2025 and 2026, and I'll talk about this a little bit in the Burnsville Center presentation, but MnDOT is doing a pavement project from the River Bridge to 42, and they're replacing 3 bridges. They're replacing the Cliff Road Bridge, the 13 Bridge, and the Burnsville Parkway Bridge. So that's planned. They're starting to work. They've been working on it for a while. With the Burnsville Parkway Bridge replacement, we, if you've ever crossed that bridge, those sidewalks seem like they're 2 feet wide, and there's no place to put snow, and it's not a good condition. So we are working with MnDOT to widen the bridge so that we have a 12-foot trail on one side and a 7-foot sidewalk on the other, and working through the motions on how to have them pay for that. So that's a 2026 construction, but we're working with them today to get it designed appropriately. So that heart of the city, we know it as being east of 35, but heart of the city does in the code and have zoning on the west side. So having that connection is important. Regina and I are available for any questions you might have.
The bridge replacement, incremental, or are they gonna just try
For
to
the 3 bridges, you mean, or?
Yeah.
I think they will be phased. they have not provided that traffic management plan to the city yet, but they are working on it. It would be over 2 years, so it would not be 3 bridges down at one time. But I haven't seen the phasing or timing of that yet.
Do you know how long it takes to replace a bridge?
I do not.
You're an engineer.
I'm not a bridge engineer.
Not really.
So with 42, maybe I'm jumping ahead, is that gonna all tie in with the changes on the flow of traffic on 42 to 35 and?
Yeah, so in the next presentation, I'll go into that in a little more detail, but the bottom line is MnDOT will be constructing that project with their full 35 project, so we are working with them to input that into their project.
With the parking, there's a couple of things I was curious about. I'm assuming they looked at levels of accessible parking and where those accessible parking spots would be for accessing the park, Ames, etc. One thing I have noticed is the flow in and out of the parking lot is narrow. It's a constriction. You know, every parking lot is going to have some of that. But are they looking at any changes in that layout or access into the ramps, first or second floor?
So are you talking about the one that's just just north of the Ames Center?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do have 2 parking structures.
Right. Right.
We aren't necessarily looking at making changes to the structure itself with this. That could be a recommendation that comes out of it, I don't know. But we're mostly looking at getting people to those spaces. And when we did this Heart of the City study, we did get some parking data. Our consultant SEH was out there during an Ames Center event and found that there were plenty of open parking spaces. You might have had to walk a little bit. And that so we call the the parking deck, which is right adjacent to Ames, we call that the deck, and we call the ramp the one that's on the other side, was virtually empty during this Ames Center event, because I think people just don't think to go there, or it's not as convenient. So that would tie into, potentially a recommendation would be getting some signage, or, and I don't want to say what the study's going to say, but a potential could be, if you've been to the Mall of America and they have all of those spaces and says how many stalls are on each, open on each level, it might be on the street saying 100 spaces are available at this parking ramp, and kind of directing people to where the open spaces are. That might, I'm not trying to suppose what it will say, but that's a potential idea.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Do you know what is, if anything, is being done to maintain like pedestrian and walkability and with people that aren't using cars to get around the heart of the city?
So as far as like snow removal, or
As far as like, I know you're like making changes or things like that, making sure there's like still viable sidewalks and things like that for people
Yes.
that are not in
we're
cars.
proposing to make wider sidewalks than there are today, and in places where there are only pavers and nothing else, removing those and making them wider concrete sidewalks. So I think only benefits for people who are walking or biking through the area.
Thank you.
The area west of 35, Burnsville Parkway 13, kind of surprised that that's considered part of heart of the city. Is there a redevelopment strategy or anything with that area?
The area west of 35W, yes. So when we did the 2040 comprehensive plan, our consultant, we knew Orange Line was coming, and there's an Orange Line stop at 35W and Burnsville Parkway. So they did some analysis, and they found that, one, there are a number of apartments that are they're transit dependent that live there. And so a recommendation was to make a stronger connection between those apartments and the Orange Line station. But then also there are a number of hotels and buildings that are kind of at what I would consider end of life or redevelopment, have some redevelopment opportunity. So they also made a suggestion that you may want to consider to re-guide and rezone that area to something that would allow higher density. And since heart of the city was right next door, we thought it'd be a nice kind of linkage or a nice transition, as a policymakers and city staff eventually recommended that those changes be made, and they were. So right now it does allow for higher density. You might see those buildings remain for a number of years, but if there is a developer that does have interest that wants to do something a little more intense, they could have that opportunity. So right now it might look, I would say it's an opportunity-rich environment. Lots of potential.
Great. Any other questions, comments? All right. No formal action is required on this agenda item either. Thank you, Jen and Regina, for that. And I'm going to welcome back Jen and Regina to talk about Burnsville Center Village Roadways update.
Thank you again, and I appreciate you allowing me to have all of my items on one of your meetings. It's been really good to be able to talk with you about all these things that are going on from engineering and from community development. So we kind of already alluded to what this is about, but here's just a little background on the Center Village. So in January in 2019, the redevelopment vision was approved by the City Council, and that's the picture in the lower left shows, what could the area around the Burnsville Center look like. And then when you add all of that potential density and potential housing to a site, what does that do to traffic? So we did a traffic study in March of 2020 to see what we might need to plan for public improvements. And that was approved, like I said, in March of 2020. And then to kind of pave the way from an environmental standpoint, the Community Development Department worked on an alternative urban area-wide review, AUAR, and that was approved in July of 2021. And then just about a year ago, Dakota County worked on their corridor management plan, and that was approved about a year ago for looking at traffic and needs for the corridor for 2040. And so a couple things came from all of that work. From the vision, it became the Aldrich extension. So I'll show you an image of that in a minute. But the redevelopment vision showed this extension of Aldrich through the site, through the mall site, to create this sort of transportation spine that then you could have redevelopment on either side. The traffic study showed that it would be an important connection to be made. And then with platting at the mall, we were able to obtain most of the right-of-way, not all, but most of it. So we're kind of setting the stage to get that extension potentially constructed. And then the 35W exit ramp to Buck Hill Road, that was also started to be envisioned in the traffic study and then more refined in the County Road 42 vision study. With the County Road 42 vision study, we applied for a transportation economic development grant through MnDOT, and we were successful. So we have funding for that one. And as I noted earlier, the 35W resurfacing and bridge project is in 2025. The TED grant was for construction in 24 and 25, and so it was just sort of an opportunity to partner with MnDOT on that. So we have been working on a preliminary design project for both of those two roadways or infrastructure improvements. In June, we kicked off the two preliminary designs. And in the fall, we had stakeholder meetings. Those were all online because our stakeholders, while they have businesses here, they live everywhere else. And so we did online meetings for that. And then we were at the Burnsville Festival and Fire Muster. We had a table inside the mall and tried to get feedback on this. And then we had 4 PMT or project management team meetings with city, county, and MnDOT staff. So lots of talk and engagement. This winter, some of you might have been at the Joint Commission update that we held. We had stakeholder meetings, again, group and then individual. We wanted to meet with the property owners that were really adjacent to, so we could get their direct feedback without being in a group setting. Regina was at Polar Fest. We had a virtual open house, so we had a website that was interactive and was trying to get feedback on the project. And then we've had 2 PMT meetings so far this year. So here's the preliminary design Aldrich extension, and this is 42 up here. Aldrich existing is off the page. And so the idea is to have Aldrich cut through the mall property and connect up, eventually out to Buck Hill Road. And for sake of knowing where we're at here, this is the existing Sears building. And at the time of the vision, the Sears building was vacant. And so this was something that was contemplated before, when the building was already vacant. And then here is kind of that cross section. If you were driving on the road, I've got a little animation. What we have envisioned is that you could have, we looked at the traffic volumes, and having 1 lane in each direction was sufficient. And having it be a treed, sort of a Main Street look was something that we got feedback from a lot of the stakeholders and from the public. Having a 5-foot shoulder is for 2 reasons. It could be on-street bikes or scooters, or it just gives room for vehicles to move over, get out of the way in case of an emergency vehicle. So we couldn't just have an 11-foot lane and have nowhere for vehicles to go. So we do need a shoulder. It could be multi-purpose with a bike lane or a scooter lane or just a shoulder. And then a really wide boulevard, called it flex space, could be trees and landscaping, could be benches, could be like a pocket park. But we have a wide right-of-way through here, and so we wanted to use the space not just for street, but for having those other amenities. And then a really wide trail. So typically our trails are 10 feet. We would be proposing 12 feet on each side, and that gives retailers the ability to use it as a cafe space, or it just gives you more space in general. So that extension is unfunded. We have no money to build it. We have money to get an idea, concept. The redevelopment is absolutely necessary, and we would in no way be forcing Sears or future Sears owner to remove the building, and so these plans will sit on a shelf essentially until that redevelopment happens. We're not able to, condemn or purchase or anything like that. So it's got to be a partnership and a collaboration. Not only with Sears, but with the other mall owners as well. There's multiple owners on the property. And then the reason for preliminary plans really is it's a starting point to discuss what's possible with developers. And also, once we have what we think is the vision and a cost, at the end of this, we'll have a pretty good cost estimate. We can start to talk about how will we fund it when the opportunity arises. What funding opportunities are there, what grants are available, and how will we do it. So we needed to get further along than just lines on a page and start to think about how it will look and have a little bit more engineering involved. So we also have concurrently, because they're tied together, we have one consultant contract for the 35W exit ramp. So kind of walk through how this will work. If you're coming south on 35W, there'll be a couple of exit lane options. You'll stay to the right, so you kind of have to think about driving and upside down. You're going to stay to the right, even though it's left on the page. Stay to the right to go west on 42. And when you get up to the top of the ramp, we'll go back. You see this is roadway space, and this is gone. This green. Then there's 5 lanes there. There will be just 2. And it'll be right turn only. So you come up the ramp and you'll be turning right. Or if you want to do anything else, you'll stay to the left in that exit, and you'll be able to go east on County Road 42 to Buck Hill Road or to the mall. And so that's that blue lane. You'll go underneath the existing County Road 42 bridge. That's kind of right next to the highway. And then when you come up and around, if you want to get on 42, it's a right turn only. So having those 2 right turns is a more efficient way of having traffic operate at that signal. There will be this roundabout, so if you, at some point you're choosing, you're going to come up and around and go right, or you're going to keep going and you go into the roundabout and you'll go into the mall, or you'll keep going to Buck Hill Road. We're creating a new pedestrian crossing that has not been there before, so the reason this works in this location is that we're eliminating so many traffic movements and so many conflict points. So it's a safer pedestrian crossing right there. And then a new 10-foot trail is the line in purple. I'm showing that there's a potential future connection that's with redevelopment that's not part of the project. So the roundabout and a little driveway is part of the project. This road is a future connection with redevelopment. So this one is funded. We got $3.1 million in that TED grant, and then Dakota County and the city will cost share the rest. We do need right-of-way from the Sears site, and we're actively working with them. And then MnDOT is going to construct this project. We're getting them preliminary plans, and then we're giving them to MnDOT, and then they'll take it from there. So our next steps, we are creating a 1-page summary for stakeholders, kind of to finalize the engagement. We're doing a report to the city council in the next month. At the Public Works Open House on May 25th, mark your calendars, come and visit us. We will be having a table there to talk about where this project landed and how it ended up. And then, like I said, we'll turn over our preliminary plans to MnDOT. They'll complete the final design, and then they'll do construction. Questions on this one?
On the Aldrich Avenue thing, would it go all the way to South Cross?
No, it will go to Buck Hill Road, kind of connects out where there's existing driveway connection today, and then Buck Hill Road will connect to South Cross.
Okay.
So the Aldridge extension is basically we're going to take the Sears location.
When Sears is ready.
When Sears is right. Now, does Sears own that footprint, or is there another stakeholder?
So there's a company called Seritage that owns it, and they are actively marketing it for sale. So we are working with Seritage, which is the current owner, and if they sell it, we will be working with that future owner.
So the future owner, basically we're saying, okay, you can't use this footprint.
That's not true. So what we're saying is, if you choose to use the footprint, we are putting Aldrich Extension on hold until such time as a developer thinks that they don't want to use the building. And so Seritage, who has the site up for sale, asked us that question very specifically. Are you going to force us to build Aldrich? And the answer is no. This is a wait and see plan. You know, when they're ready, we are ready. When they're ready to take the building down, we have plans that can go there. But if they're not taking the building down, Aldrich does not happen. And I just want to add a lot of things that have happened with the Burnsville Center. It is really dependent on redevelopment, private property owners, and what the city has done is positioned ourselves to be ready when they're ready. So we have a vision that helps to guide the use of the property. We have a traffic study that helps to determine what improvements are needed. We did the AUAR, which is the environmental document that kind of clears the way to have high density. We've looked at sewer capacity in that document, water capacity, so we know we can support it. So the city is kind of paving the way for that. And then, Regina, if you want to talk about TIF, we have, and zoning too.
Yeah, so the city, we re-guided and rezoned not only the Burnsville Center property, but the area north off of County Road 42 all the way up to McAndrews, and then west to County Road 5. We rezoned that to mixed use before it was zoned business, where you could basically just have commercial type uses, retail, grocery stores, things like that. Now you can have things like housing and those businesses as well. So it gives more flexibility to future developers and clears out those entitlements. So rezoned, re-guided, and then we did seek special legislation. Took us 3 years to get, but we were successful in determining the Burnsville Center proper area to be considered a tax increment financing district. So what will happen when that area is activated and development happens, will activate the district, and then any of those property taxes that would have just gone to like the general pool will stay within that area and can be used within that area to make improvements for things like parking structures, street lighting, sidewalks, roadways, and can help contribute to that. And so we don't have any active projects right now for things like housing or higher density. So when we do have something that will increase the tax base in that area, that's when we'll activate the TIF district. So it has potential. We've seen other regional malls within the area, a lot of activity happening around Rosedale and Ridgedale and Southdale. And we've certainly put those tools in place, like Jen said, and cleared any barriers for developers to come to Burnsville. We're ready.
You had mentioned that at Buck Hill in 42, there'll be a pedestrian crossing, if I understand that correctly.
At 42, yes. So when this purple pinky line here is a new trail, and then we have a set crossing here of 42.
Is there, because I can't recall, a sidewalk from the 35W exit like towards Target in that area?
There is a sidewalk right now. You can kind of see there's a crossing of the bridge on 35, and then there's this crosswalk across that large ramp, and then it continues. But it's a narrow sidewalk.
Yeah.
And so that was in the multi-modal presentation I gave. We're studying widening. So the county on all their county roads wants no more sidewalks. They want to have 10-foot trails. So we're studying replacing those sidewalks with 10-foot trails. Again, no funding, we're just studying to see how much will it cost so that we're ready for funding opportunities. but there is a sidewalk for them to get to. If that's a question, they're not gonna be just sort of dumped into a ramp.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Again, no formal action is required on this. We appreciate the information that both of you have shared tonight. And I'll welcome you back for the miscellaneous part of our agenda. I'm just kidding.
I have no comment on that.
Our next meeting is scheduled for May 1st, 2023. At this time, I would like to request a call for adjournment if there's nothing else from staff.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed or want to stay later tonight? Nope, okay. With that, let's adjourn and have a lovely evening, everybody.